if you kind of, the Confederates are trying to get across the creek and get into the red hexes along that road for the 33, 31. If they can get there, they can get 10 points at the end of the game. If they can get to the yellow, then they would get a 6. And if they can get into the purple, they just get a +2. But the yellow and the red are actually mutually exclusive. You can't score for both of them. It's whatever your better version of it, whatever your furthest progress is. So if you get into the yellow, you get a 6. If you get to the red, you get a 10. So, and all they need for this scenario is to get, I think, 8 for marginal victory.
Okay.
Let's see, what else can I tell you? Gosh, I can't think of anything. Terrain is huge in this game. This is a one-turn scenario. So as soon as you use up the fatigue levels for all of the units here, the day is done. And normally the way the day ends, or the action cycle ends, is one of a couple different ways. If I win the initiative, I can either play or pass. If I pass, my opponent then has the opportunity to play or pass. If we both pass back to back, then the day is done. So in a one-turn scenario like this, unless you're winning, you don't want to pass, because your opponent could then say, well, I passed too, and the game's over. So it's a dangerous thing to do. So if you win the initiative a lot, sometimes that can actually be a detriment, because you're using up fatigues that you may want to save for later. So some of this is about resource management as well.
So I see there's some units coming in September, I believe. You said this is a one-turn game, but how do those units come in?
You're looking at the timeline?
Yes.
Let's see here. Yeah, the CSA reinforcements. In this one, there's actually one guy. There's Hood, John Bell Hood, and in this scenario, he sits on the track until the Confederates actually win the initiative with a 6. If they win with a 6, then he can get placed up there in Ringgold with B.R. Johnson. So that adds an extra leadership that you did not previously have. So that's actually very helpful. But it's completely random. It may or may not happen. I've seen it happen for some people, like on the first action, and I've seen it not occur at all in this game. So it's one of the fortunes of war.
Okay, and you said there was a die roll for the weather in the very beginning?
In the advanced scenarios, typically there's a random events phase. In this one, there's not. But yeah, it is possible to have a rain event for the current turn, and for the current plus a couple. So you can have 3 days of rain in a row. And what that will then do is your movement. If you look on the movement charts, or rather the terrain charts, I think, one or the other, it tells you, a road on a perfect day is 1, and when it gets muddy on a rain day, it costs 2. So that immediately, and then all the other terrain types take an extra 1 to get into. So that can make problems for movement. Plus, that immediately eliminates the possibility of crossing the rivers at the shallow fords. You see there are a lot of fords there across, like Thetford's at 3730. During a rain event, if you're playing a campaign, that's huge, because then you can only cross these major rivers at bridges. And if you have a tricky Union player and he wants to blow up those bridges, he can actually funnel you into particular places and control where he would have the battles. So very cool stuff that can happen here. The light blue you can see are just little minor creeks, and you can always cross those with roads. In rain events, they become a little more swollen, so in some cases you cannot attack across those if it's raining. But you also have the capability in the advanced game to build bridges. You can build pontoon bridges across these creeks. If a permanent bridge gets blown up, you can build a new one if you need to. And control of the railroads is pretty important. A lot of the scenarios, like in the advanced ones, will have supply rules, which two things you're trying to do in most of these games, in the advanced games, are maintain your line of supply, which on these little 1 and 2 turn scenarios you don't have to worry about because that's kind of a given. But if you're playing for 20 or 30 turns, you have to make sure that your units can get supplies without interference, and that's pretty tricky.
Where are the railroads? I don't see them on the terrain chart, and I can't make any out on the map.
Sure, the railroads are all the red lines. So you can see over Chattanooga, you can see the Nashville and Chattanooga Railroad coming in, and it kind of flows north and out across the river and becomes the Atlantic Railroad. So anytime you see a red line, units can actually walk along those as well. They can march along the railroads too. So those are treated like regular roads. But in the advanced game, you can do strategic movement. So you can actually take a unit and move it upwards of 30 or 40 hexes all in one movement by just taking them along the rail lines. And sometimes you have victory points for burning down the railroad stations. So like at hex number 3024, you got the Chickamauga station. If Pegram was so inclined, you could come in here, and for his action, he could try to damage the railroad station. In which case he would get a little. Let's see if I find one here. May not have one here, but you can damage them and you can actually destroy them. So obviously, with damage later on, there it is. You can actually try to fix them up if you need to, so they can be used again, and it's just a temporary thing. Or you can actually destroy them for victory points. So just depending on the scenario. So anytime you see along a red railroad, and you may see little red buildings there, that means there is a station there and can actually be destroyed.
Okay. And you said that bridges could be destroyed also?
Yep. Most of the bridges, what will happen is you need kind of a, let's see, an example here. Let's say I've got P.R. Johnson here, and he wanted to blow up a bridge. He has to just be on either side of it, and you do some die rolls, and you get modifiers. You can never do it during, I think during rain events or something like that, because of the powder and all that. But yeah, you just have to occupy a side of it. And I think the limitation is you can't have that situation there where you've got the enemy right across the other side, because they would prevent you from doing that. But you would then have the ability to roll on it and say, I'm trying to destroy the bridge. And in which case then you get, as you see that marker there, destroyed bridge, and it's unusable as it would normally be.
Okay, and you also said that there were zones of controls in here, and I also see a cavalry retreat on the charts. How are retreats handled and cavalry retreats?
Excellent, thank you. You brought me back into combat. So normally what happens whenever, let's say, if Walker was successful in driving those units out of the breastwork, I'm going to open up the F6 charts again. And you can see there's a tab there called Retreat Priorities. This is probably the most complex part of this game because it takes a little getting used to. Because this is sort of your 1040 step-by-step tax form for trying to figure out how a unit is going to behave when it's been defeated in battle. Normally what happens is on the chart, on the combat chart, if they get a lowercase r, that means retreat. And the unit that's suffering retreat has to retreat 2 hexes away. They always have the option, if they lose in battle but are not forced to retreat, they can always retreat voluntarily just 1 hex. But in this case, if they get a forced retreat, you can see on retreat chart 1 there, they have to do, the first hex has to follow one of these priorities. And they're always trying to do the highest priority possible. And the situations may come up where through surrounding enemy units and their zones of control or terrain types, that forces them farther and farther down the priority number. And the farther down on the priority number that they have to go, the more likely that they're going to get further disorganized and take more combat losses through stragglers and just total chaos. So all things being equal here, the priority number 1 is to just say, okay, I'm going to take wood here, for example, and priority 1 is to move away from the attacking unit. In the first hex, he wants to try to travel by road further than where he was from the unit that's attacked him, so I drag him there. And that satisfies that first step. as priority 1.
So knowing these retreat priorities could be a huge advantage in this game, just because you could channel some people to be forced to go a certain direction.
Absolutely. That is the key. Some of the very good strategy guides that are online on, for example, Jay Meyer's website. Somebody wrote like the 10 essential bits of information you need to learn for strategies, developing strategies for playing this game. Is one of the big ones is trying to inflict more damage through flanking and causing retreat losses. So if Wood was unable to just make that simple retreat away, because let's say, put this kind of here like so, if that situation came up where I had my unit in the way, just is now preventing him from doing a very simple retreat. In this case here, Wood would still be able to retreat 1 hex away from Walker. He would just have to move down to priority number 2, which is actually priority 3. Actually, well, it goes even further, but essentially it's just saying that he's not farther away. He's further away from the one that attacked him, but he's still in the zone of control of somebody else who's an enemy. But as long as he follows the road, he's okay. But if he had to do this situation here, where he had to kind of go like this, because he's not following a road and he's still in the zone of control of an enemy, there's a really good chance that he's going to start taking more combat losses. And that's bad. And the longer you can do that, like you were saying, Charles, if you can funnel it so that he's going to get really hurt on the retreat, then that's the sign of really great, operational leadership. I'm not quite there yet. I'm just like, I want to attack the guy. So, yeah, retreats are very important. You can see there that's the first couple steps. More severe is the route. If you really pummel them in a combat situation, you may have to do a route, which means that they have to move a minimum of 4 hexes and a maximum of 6 hexes away. So Wood would have to do something like this. He'd have to get 1, 2, 3, 4. At minimum, he'd have to be that far away. But he could then opt to go further away. The only restrictions to that you can see in the retreat chart too is they can't basically do a loop-de-loop. They can't game it so that they get a few hexes away here and then start coming back saying, oh, well, I'm back. You can't do that. If they're routed, they are trying to run away. And that's probably, like I said, that's probably the one aspect of the game that for new players is important to learn, but it's also a little confusing because you really have to monitor that chart and say, okay, well, if this happens to me, if I get attacked at this point, where am I going to have to retreat to? Most of the time, it's pretty straightforward, but if you get surrounded in a flanking situation, then you can get into some deep trouble quickly. What else? Let's see. To kind of give you a little background on some of the other titles, the first game of the series is Stonewall Jackson's Way, and that's kind of your Cedar Mountain, and second Manassas is the focus. And then my favorite title so far is Here Come the Rebels. That's the second one. That's all Antietam, and that's the one I'm playing a campaign game in right now. That's a lot of fun. And then you have Roads to Gettysburg, which obviously is the whole Gettysburg campaign and the invasion of Pennsylvania. And then you have some smaller ones. You've got Stonewall in the Valley, which is all about the Shenandoah campaign, which is very much about maneuver, and you have to really take into consideration all the terrain factors. And let's see what else. So you've got Stonewall's Last Battle. You've got Grant Takes Command, which is loved by most. You've got Roads to On to Richmond, which is the Peninsula campaign. That's the one that's very expensive, hard to find.
I have that one.
This one's Battle Above the Clouds. So, and what was the question?
Why is it called Battleclouds?
Are we back on that again? Well, if you look over at Hex 2830 or 2831, right there at Summertown, the first shots that were fired when the Union were approaching, they were kind of coming up through Craven House, and they were attempting to assault Missionary Ridge. And because of the cloudy morning that day, Confederate entrenchments up on the side of the mountain looked like they were actually having the battle above the clouds because of the fog layer. So, and the cover of the game represents that actual that combat or that battle. So it's pretty cool. War game. I've been playing it since 2008. It was one of those ones that I had it on my shelf. I said, I've got to learn this game. It's just so daunting. I must learn it. And so I joined one of the online tournaments that they have every couple of years. And humbling, to say the least, because the first game I had no idea what I was doing. I was in with the Sharks. And I was a little minnow, but you learn quick. And you learn all the little techniques and tactics from the big players, the Sharks. And I think it's just probably one of the best Civil War games I've ever played. So